Der Adenauer Stiftung AJC-Austausch war ein ganz wesentliches Programm in meiner persönlichen Entwicklung.
I will never forget it. It was a really unique and special opportunity.
Das war von einer emotionalen Tiefe wie weniges, was man im Leben erlebt.
Jedes Jahr reist aus den USA eine Gruppe von 10 bis 12 Personen nach Deutschland, umgekehrt eine ähnlich große Gruppe in die USA.
When I look back over the years, the proof is obvious. To see the participants as they've grown within AJC, many of whom have become leaders in their regions.
Es war für mich sehr prägend und auch in meiner politischen Verhaltensweise, Entscheidungsweise jetzt dann hier in den 30 Jahren im Deutschen Bundestag schon auch gestaltend und beeinflussend.
Man merkt das an den Reaktionen der Teilnehmer, die dann sagen, das war für mich auch persönlich, auch emotional etwas ganz Besonderes, ein life-changing experience.
By 1980, we achieved a new milestone, and that milestone was the partnership between the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and the American Jewish Committee, which established a pioneering exchange program.
Sie haben dazu dem Bundeskanzler ein Anfrageschreiben überreicht. Der hat das übers Auswärtige Amt den politischen Stiftungen zugespielt, weil sowohl der Kanzler als auch das Auswärtige Amt befanden, dass sie sich diese Chance nicht entgehen lassen sollten.
Ich habe es mit Interesse in meinem Bericht aus dem Jahre 82 wieder gelesen. Wir waren quer über den Kontinent und spürten, dass ethnische Zuordnungen in den USA eine ganz wichtige Rolle spielen. Allein Chicago mit den verschiedenen Neighborhoods, dann die beeindruckenden Begegnungen mit Leuten aus der Jewish Community, die sich um Betreuung, Aufarbeitung von Holocaust gekümmert haben.
Neben den großen außen- und sicherheitspolitischen Themen, Transatlantik-Themen und Nahost-Themen war es uns auch immer wichtig, tagesaktuell zu bleiben, als zum Beispiel der Anschlag auf ein Einfamilienhaus in Solingen stattfand, haben wir das sofort in unsere Agenda aufgenommen, weil es nicht nur in Deutschland diskutiert wurde, sondern wir es auch wichtig fanden, das in diesem Rahmen zu erörtern.
When I was on the program as a member of an organized Jewish group visiting Germany on this mission, I had a real sense that I was part of history.
I was there in 2016, which was shortly after Germany had commenced its very ambitious program of integrating Muslim refugees from war-torn countries. So I learned a lot about that.
Kein anderes Programm, das ich kenne, bietet den Teilnehmern diese Dichte an konstruktiven Gesprächen, Begegnungen mit ganz normalen Menschen hier in Deutschland, aber auch hochrangigen Politikern.
I was a part of an epilogue of a horrifically tragic and cataclysmic event in history. And I had the sense that I was seeing a Germany that was transformed.
Die Wunde, die der Holocaust auch in Deutschland gerissen hat, wird umso spürbarer und gegenwärtiger, je mehr man sieht, wie lebendige jüdische Gemeinschaft in einem Land wie den USA aussehen kann. Das hat auch sehr nachdenklich gestimmt und das prägt einen, denke ich, auch für ein Leben.
The Friday night service we went to at the Orienberger Strasse Synagogue in Berlin. This was a group of American Jews in the year 2016 in a sanctuary on a Friday night. The sanctuary was filled with Jews of all ages, and there we were reciting traditional Friday night prayers in Hebrew. It was incredibly moving. It was overpowering. It was emotional. Some of us were weeping, including yours truly, and it was an experience I will never forget.
Now it's 40 years, and so much has been achieved, and not just the exchange programs, but so many other programs and relationships and friendships that have been established between the American Jewish Committee and the Adenauer Stiftung.
Es geht ans Herz, es geht wirklich an die Persönlichkeit und das ist, glaube ich, das ganz Besondere, was dieses Programm auszeichnet.
This relationship will become no less important. If anything, arguably, it will only become still more important. And we will be here as your friends and as your partners.
Ich glaube, das ist ein ganz, ganz wertvoller Beitrag, nicht nur der Adenauer Stiftung, sondern auch des AJC. Und ich hoffe sehr, dass das Programm auch weitere 40 Jahre erleben wird.
Guten Tag and welcome, everyone. My name is Tony Meyer, and I'm the co-chair of AJC's Lawrence and Lee Raymer Institute for German-Jewish Relations. I also serve as the chair of the American Jewish Committee's National Board of Governors, and I'm an alumnus of the AJC Adenauer Leadership Exchange Program. Thank you to our global audience for joining today's Advocacy Anywhere program. As we saw in the introductory video, the 40 years of the AJC-Konrad Adenauer Foundation Leadership Exchange Program have produced numerous impressive and accomplished leaders on both sides of the Atlantic. Today, the program continues to be an essential tool for building understanding between engaged Germans and American Jews and strengthening this key transatlantic partnership. For the first part of today's program, we will hear about the legacy of Konrad Adenauer, a trailblazer in fostering relationships between the American Jewish community and Germany in the years post-World War II. Following this discussion, we will turn our attention from history to the future as we hear from the next generation in Germany about the impact of this exchange program and the future of the transatlantic relationship. Today's program is dedicated in loving memory of Lawrence Raymer, who, together with his wife Lee, made possible AJC's pioneering Lawrence and Lee Raymer Institute for German-Jewish Relationships in 1998. To begin, I will now turn to Eugene Dubow, founding director of AJC Berlin, and ask him to share with you his reflections from the very beginning of the AJC Adenauer Leadership Exchange Partnership. Gene?
I'm Eugene Dubow, founding director of AJC's Berlin office, which opened in 1998. However, before that, in 1980, I was AJC's field director when the first AJC-Konrad Adenauer Foundation exchange was being planned. Because of that, I was part of the planning process. I also started the second group visit to Germany, which I was the staff person. So one can say I was there at the beginning. When the first discussions about an exchange program between AJC and the Adenauer Foundation began, the Holocaust had ended just a mere 35 years before. There was practically no contact between the American Jewish community and Germany. Certainly no contact with German organizations. The chances for the success of this radical idea were practically nil, and it was very radical. And yet, a few years later, these two entities entered into an agreement that almost no one thought would last more than a year or two. They took a chance, they paid off, and it is still going strong 40 years later. The exchange has succeeded because the idea for such a program was sound, and the two organizations worked hard to make sure that it would last. AJC understood the importance of it in 1980, even though Germany was still divided. There were still two Germanys. It became even more important in 1990 after the unification. AJC wanted Germans to understand and see how vibrant the American Jewish community was. It wanted for itself to have a direct opportunity to see how Germans were dealing with anti-Semitism and what their attitude toward Israel was. It further wished to see whether democracy had truly established itself in Germany. The Adenauer Foundation wanted to show the quality of their democracy and that it had developed to the point that they understood the responsibility for the Holocaust which had been imposed upon them. They welcomed the connection with AJC as a vote of confidence in their democracy and as an opportunity to see how contemporary Germany would be received by American Jews. The exchange program has done a great deal more than just having groups of Germans and American Jews get to know each other a bit. It opened the further possibilities of extended programs being developed and of having Jewish input in the halls of German government. Without question, the AJC Berlin office would never have been a reality without first having established the relationship that continues to have a wonderful effect between both the Adenauer Foundation and AJC. The exchange served as one of the cornerstones with great understanding between American Jews in Germany, and I am honored to have been part of it.
I'm delighted to be speaking with Professor Beate Neuss, who's a longtime professor of political science at the University of Chemnitz, which is in the eastern part of Germany. Almost everyone who participated in the AJC-Konrad Adenauer exchange program knows Beate because she's met with so many of you. Beate, I think this is a great moment to talk about Konrad Adenauer. Who was he actually as a person? Why is there so much adulation of him, not just in Germany, but in Europe, where he played an important role? And was Konrad Adenauer someone who was always linked to the Jewish world, not just in our minds?
Yes, thank you. I'm pleased that I may dwell on this topic. I think we Germans were very lucky to have him as our first chancellor. Born in the 19th century, he was a person who had lived through very difficult historical times, like the First World War and the Weimar Republic. And he had a close relationship to Judaism and Jews in Germany from his young years on. He was befriended in high school with Jewish persons. He had several Jewish people being his friends during the Weimar Republic. And then he had the experience with the Nazi time, with the regime, which imprisoned him twice in 1933 and in 1944. So he was very experienced to create a Germany which would fit into Europe, which would fit into the Western world, and which would be able to keep peace and start reconciliation with its neighbors, but especially with the Jewish world.
So let's go back a minute to Cologne and to when Konrad Adenauer was growing up. Now, this year we're marking 1700 years of Jewish life in Germany, and the earliest proof we have actually comes from Cologne. So it's an old Jewish community there. Do you think, did he have a lot of contact and interaction with the Jewish world when he was growing up, or did he live in his own circle, so to speak? Do we have any idea of what that kind of interaction might have looked like?
Yes, we do have an idea. Although he was a very devout Catholic, he at the same time was pro-Zionist. He had a lot of Jewish friends, as I said before, and even in the 1920s, he joined the Committee Pro-Palestine. It was a Zionist organization, which he joined as a German, as a Catholic, as a non-Jew. And so he met a lot of Jews there, of course, as well, and was very familiar with Jewish life, Jewish habits. He even learned a little bit of Hebrew when he was young. So I didn't know it for a long time, and certainly it wasn't much. But when he was presented, or when he was shown a Torah while he was visiting Ben Gurion in 1966 in Israel, he could recite the first lines of the Torah. At least for that, he knew enough Hebrew.
But I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to when he was part of maybe this pro-Zionist movement, and when he had friends in school who were Jewish, and then came, and he was mayor of Cologne. He was a very prestigious, distinguished citizen who was very respected,
Right.
a man of great moral authority, I think.
Yes, that's true.
And then the Nazi regime came along. Did he exist long in this regime, or what happened then to him?
Not at all. I think he was very courageous. When Hitler came to Cologne, he didn't receive him at the airport. He didn't put out the flags on the government buildings of Cologne and on the bridges. He put down the flags which were already there. And so it didn't take for long until he was imprisoned the first time. It was in March 1933. When he was already imprisoned and his accounts were taken away from him, so that he was without any income but had 7 children to care for. So he was in a very miserable situation, and he got some help. Maybe that's what you are asking for. He got some help from his long-term Jewish friend, Danny Heinemann. He was son of parents who immigrated to the United States. So he was a citizen of the United States where he was born, but he came back early in the 20th century for school and education and profession in Germany before he left during the Third Reich again. But he came with a coffin full of money to Adenauer after he got out of the prison to give him money before he left Germany. Heinemann left Germany. Mm-hmm.
So the Adenauer family was in its way sustained during the entire Nazi period, with help from this friend in particular, but also another Jewish friend. I think there was another one in the background.
There were other Jewish friends helping him as well, yes.
So we see a very positive relationship. And then after the Allies took over, the defeat of the Nazis, it didn't take long to recognize, I think, the really towering authority of Konrad Adenauer beyond Cologne, of course. And then this is where AJC started coming in a little, because AJC became very engaged even before the war was over in trying to imagine a post-war Germany and how a Jewish world could interact with an entity that perpetrated the Holocaust. It was really quite remarkable. It was while the Holocaust was continuing, AJC leaders were already thinking, how can we do this? So I think it seems natural that they had a good rapport, I think, with Konrad Adenauer, particularly our president, Jacob Blaustein. Can you tell us a little about that relationship?
Yes, Adenauer, who was definitely already decided during the last month of the war and then beginning after World War II that there should be some compensation for Jewish lives and Jewish, you can't compensate lives, of course, but Jewish material losses and so on. So when the negotiations started on the Wiedergutmachungsabkommen, the treaty, the agreement about compensations, he met Jacob Blaustein, because Jacob Blaustein was as well arguing and advocating for a compensation treaty agreement.
I think that Jacob Blaustein and Konrad Adenauer were very focused on similar thoughts, the importance of the outreach to the Jewish world with compensation, and also on the principles of democracy. And AJC was very keen in the late 40s and the 50s in working with Germany to reform the entire education system. And they did not tire I think, of meeting with Konrad Adenauer, not just Jacob Blaustein, but others later, to talk about instituting democracy and the outreach that was necessary on this.
Yes, that's true. As far as I know, and you know it better, the AJC was active all the time during the 50s and 60s to promote democracy education, to promote pluralistic society, tolerance, and so on. And so, well, Germany has something very special which the United States doesn't have. It is a tradition of the 1940s and early 50s, when first the occupation powers were caring for it, a democracy education. So in this context, there was a very close relationship with the AJC all the time. And AJC was present in Germany all the time. That's my impression, at least.
Going back to Jacob Blaustein, he had extremely good contacts with the US government, including directly with President Truman. And I think these contacts were of interest to Adenauer in general, to the German government, because of their interest in a strong relationship with the US. Could you tell us a little about the thinking that was going on at the time, and this whole notion of Germany being anchored in the West? Was that clear from the beginning when the war was over, or how did this evolve in Konrad Adenauer's mind?
Well, this was very clear, because the alternative would have been the communist East. And for Adenauer, who came from the Weimar Republic as a Democrat and who was a Catholic, that means believing not in communism but in God, it was impossible to give West Germany to the Eastern communist totalitarianism. So besides the fact that Adenauer was deeply convinced that he had to do something to reconciliate with the Jewish world, he knew that this would help him. Of course, he was a politician. He knew that this would help him to reconstruct trust with his European neighbors, but as well with the United States. And it was for him very important to have a close bond with the United States. They were protecting Germany, and that this would go on, not just during the time of occupation, but that this would last. And NATO, of course, which was very much promoted by Adenauer, and he tried very hard to convince the German people who didn't want to serve again. He thought it was absolutely necessary to have a continuing bond, something which wouldn't end. The NATO treaty was going on for a long time and prolonged ever since. Yes, he wanted to firmly anchor Germany in the West, in the democracies. And from time to time, he didn't trust his own people. So he thought it was good to be in close connection to the United States, who could have an eye on the German development.
And did, in this way, the American Jewish community, and in particular, I think AJC did play an extremely active role. Were we a bridge as the American Jewish community for Konrad Adenauer a little to the US?
Yes, certainly, because this was at the same time the connection to a very important part of the civil society of the United States. I mean, you have some very important personalities as members of the AJC. So this was always a possibility to have contact for discussion, not only for him, but for his administration, for discussion of topics, to search for new ideas or to implement some ideas onto the American side, yes.
Do you think for AJC and for other American Jewish groups, it was sometimes a delicate balance between wanting to reach out to Germany and yet knowing there were still very high levels of anti-Semitism after the war in Germany in the 50s and the 60s. And AJC throughout the 50s was warning about the number of Nazis that Adenauer took into his government, as well as the frequent anti-Semitic attacks. Why do you think that Konrad Adenauer was so willing to accept former Nazis in his government? Because he certainly seems like someone who, I mean, he himself suffered from the Nazis and had certainly a link to the Jewish people. Why would he do that?
Well, first of all, if you think that every 10th German was a member of the Nazi Party. So if you had to go on after World War II with the new administration, you hardly had any persons who were not communists and not Nazis to build up a new government which would function. And I think having them in the government, I mean, the most important was Mr. Globke. The others were minor persons in minor positions, was having them under control. So there, and even if you look at the number of Nazis being judges, unfortunately, and being in other positions, including government positions, democracy in Germany flourished. So it is better to have them under control, to integrate them, than to give them a chance to cling together and start a putsch or something like that, a coup. Probably these two reasons. You had to have capable persons, and even dictatorships look for capable persons and have them in their service. So Adenauer had to have capable persons and accepted them. And the second is to have them under control.
Yeah, it was not an easy decision for him, I'm sure, with all of these cases, how to steer a country out of fascism. There's a lot to learn from Konrad Adenauer and the decisions he took or didn't take. Another important area for him was Israel. You mentioned his very early interest in Israel. How did this relationship develop, given that in 1952, we had the signing of the Luxembourg Agreement to pay reparations largely to Israel, but also to Jews throughout the world. But it wasn't so accepted at first in Israel. How did this relationship develop between him and Israel?
Maybe that because he was a religious person, he had a very early interest in Palestine. And then Israel was founded around the same time as the Federal Republic of Germany. And as Jews were living there, so his interest was, since he was interested in Judaism and Jews, so he was interested in Israel. And then he became very good friend with Ben-Gurion. They didn't meet very often, but they wrote to each other and they understood each other from the first moment. And that was a very moving friendship. So until he saw Ben-Gurion the last time a year before he died in Israel. So this was kind of his being bound to Israel.
And with that, Konrad Adenauer really laid the foundation for the close relations that Germany to this day has with Israel. By all differences and tensions, nonetheless, it's a key relationship for Germany, for Israel, and for Israel within Europe to know.
Yes. It's very close. It's not all of it is really open to the public for good reasons concerning armament deliveries and so on and payments. This is one reason, yes, that we still have very close relationship with Israel, and even on the civils, on the side of the citizens, there are many Germans being to Israel, young Germans, older Germans, and the other way around. And Berlin started to be a hype city for Israelis before Corona came. Yes.
You know, we're coming to the end now, but there's one more incident I'd like to mention that was important for AJC and Konrad Adenauer, namely the Bitburg ceremony controversy, where President Reagan, at the insistence of Chancellor Kohl, visited this cemetery where SS soldiers had been buried. It was a huge controversy. Everyone tried to play it down. AJC tried to steer it in a way that it was a very brief visit, and then also, at the suggestion of AJC, at least according to our history books, they went together to visit the grave of Konrad Adenauer. And this was, I think, an important moment in German American Jewish reconciliation.
Yes, that's true, because reconciliation started with Adenauer, and democracy started with the Chancellor Adenauer. So I think it was a very good idea of AJC to introduce the visit at the grave together with Reagan and Kohl, of course.
It was an important visit.
Yes,
and
it was.
You became more aware of us because you yourself were an early participant in the AJC Adenauer program.
That's right. And as I said before, in a different situation, it was a life-changing experience. And if you had asked me at that time, and I reflected about it before I went to the United States in '82, I wouldn't have thought that the result of this exchange was so tremendous. Because, I mean, we were 25 people and 25 people were coming, so not many people, but it has such a trickling down effect. And it was so important even for German reunification, where AJC played an important role with David Harris, who said to Israel and to the American president that German reunification was better than to have two states, with one of them being a dictatorship. So it was important until including German unification.
In addition to being a professor, you've been very active in the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. And so we're very grateful that for all your work for many decades, really, meeting with so many people from AJC. And I thank you for this conversation, reflecting on the great legacy of one of the true European leaders to remember and reflect on, Konrad Adenauer. Thanks, Beata.
I have to thank the AJC, and I must say that the AJC and the exchange program and the contacts we have, it's not only the exchange program, that we are very grateful for that, and that we that we cherish the cooperation very much. It's one of our very important points of cooperation with different organizations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alan Rich. I'm the co-chair of the AJC Berlin Raymer Institute, and a proud 1990 alum of the AJC Adenauer Exchange Program. And what a year to be visiting Germany, 1990, the year of unification. I also had the honor of being the co-chair of the 25th anniversary celebration of the exchange program in 2005. And my other co-chair, you saw previously, Professor Neuss. And so it was very good to see her again. Today, now that we've heard about the incredible story and legacy of Konrad Adenauer, and we've also had an introduction to the impact of the Adenauer Leadership Exchange Program from one of its founders, Eugene Dubow. We have celebrated the past. Now we'll return to the present and the future when we hear from a couple of young voices, and so nowadays everybody's young to me, on how the AJC Adenauer partnership has had an impact on the transatlantic partnership and how it can continue to do so. Joining me today for this conversation is Dr. Remco Lemus, Director of the AJC Berlin Raymer Institute for German Jewish Relations, and my old friend, Dr. Christina Eichhorst, Head of International Relations for Daimler AG and an alumni of the AJC Adenauer Exchange Program from 2012. Christina, if we could begin with you, I would love you to tell us a little bit more about your background, how you became involved in this program, your experience, and why you felt it was an important life experience for you.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Good to see you. Well, I have been with the Adenauer Foundation prior to me joining Daimler, and I was actually head of the team that was in charge of organizing the exchange programs. So in that capacity, I had the honor to participate in the exchange program in 2012. And well, we traveled to New York, Washington, and then Florida. And I have to say, for me personally, that was truly a life-changing experience. And that is not just this cliche term to speak about it, but really life-changing in the sense that I always perceived myself as someone who dealt with or engaged with the topic of Holocaust quite intensively, you know, in school, well, whether it be religion or German classes or history classes. I really learned a lot about Holocaust in school, and also at home. My parents would talk a lot about the topic with us, and we read a lot of books, etc., etc. But it remained a kind of an abstract thing. And then traveling to the US and having these many meetings with your colleagues from AJC, but also the home hospitality events. And then most importantly to me, I have to say, to meet a Holocaust survivor in Florida was something that somehow turned this abstract knowledge about the history of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, and also to this whole topic of well, what it means for Jews to live in the US and also in Germany nowadays, made something, I mean, it brought it to somehow to life for me. And especially meeting the Holocaust survivor was really an emotional moment for all of us, I have to say. And so, yeah, well, we returned to Germany, had also meetings afterwards at the AJC office in Berlin. Spoke back then was Dietra Berger still, who was head of the office, and we then continued to engage with her, have discussions about, yeah, anti-Semitism mainly in Germany. And then a year later, the participants from the exchange program the year after me, so in 2013, they approached me and asked me what I thought about the idea to have a alumni network. So, and I thought that was a brilliant idea. We actually had the idea before, but it was always something that meant a lot of work. And we were quite happy to have then volunteers who offered to support us in establishing this alumni network. And we established it, I think, in 2014. I can't remember exactly. It was quite a research also we did, because we tried to get in touch with everyone from all the previous exchange programs since the very beginning. And that was, I mean, you can imagine that, I guess, quite a research work, because you know, emails and these kind of things were not existent in, I don't know exactly the first year, I have to admit now. No, it's 40 years, so, well. But we did this research, and well, now we have about 110, 120 members, and we still try to convince everyone who's now on the exchange program, and also in the coming years, to also become a member, so we can, you know, stay in touch and really make use of this huge network of people who participated in the exchange program.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to go to Remco to ask him a question about something that you touched on, and that is the state of anti-Semitism and the awareness of anti-Semitism in Germany today. Any comments that you might have on it, and any comments on how a program such as this, from your perspective, can really effectively address that?
Thank you, Alan. So I think when we look at the exchange program, is what kind of stands out for me is that when we bring people from Germany to the US, they get exposed, so to say, to this vibrant and diverse Jewish life that there is in the US. And I think this, first of all, is a very good reminder of that we in Europe, and especially not in Germany, should never accept that Jewish life needs to be secured by fences, walls, and security guards. So I think this is something that is, I think, always important to keep in mind, and just showing this reality in the United States. And I know things have also changed in the US, but still the overall situation is better. And the state of anti-Semitism in Germany and in broader Europe, I mean, we have seen the terror attack in Halle just 1 year ago, a little longer than 1 year. We are seeing a rise in anti-Semitic incidents and crimes. In 2019, it was 2,000, I guess. So the situation is not good, and it's deteriorating. On the other hand, we are making progress on the political level. When you look at the Bundestag resolution to sideline BDS, that's of course a success. We now have in almost every state in Germany an anti-Semitism commissioner. We have an anti-Semitism commissioner on the federal level. Last year, we have seen the banning of the anti-Semitic terrorist organization Hezbollah. So it is we have like two things happening at the same time. But again, we are not in a good spot when it comes to anti-Semitic crimes, and I guess that's something we unfortunately still have to work on also in the future.
Thank you. Christina, this week there was a very exciting announcement issued on the 26th, and I know that you were a participant in it. 5 major German corporations, which included Daimler, announced their adoption of the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism. How do you think the exchange program and what you've done subsequent to that helped inform you as to the importance of the actions that were taken this week? Because I'm sure that you were not a passive player in the decision to do so.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. First of all, it was really, I was quite happy also to be part of that project, I have to say. Maybe just some background. These 5 major corporations were, Daimler, as you said, and then VW, Deutsche Bank, Deutsche Bahn, and then the BVB, the Borussia Dortmund Football Club. And these 5 organizations already came together in May 2019 to donate each of them €1 million to Yad Vashem. And that was, of course, when it comes to Daimler, mainly also part of the activities that the company engages in since a lot of years due to its dark history it had during the Holocaust and the forced labor Daimler benefited from. So the company tries to, on a constant basis, to engage with the topic of anti-Semitism and also racism. And these 5 corporations then came together and decided to adopt this definition, and also to publish a declaration against anti-Semitism and racism. And I was part of that project because I was in touch with the German chapter of Friends of Yad Vashem, and had the chance then to bring the proposal forward that Yad Vashem made to me again then within the company, and to say, well, I think it's a good idea to have this definition adopted and to position ourselves again against anti-Semitism. And we then decided to publish this whole project, and made it public in an event on the 26th January, on the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So, and I think for me, of course, it's kind of a natural thing to if someone comes to me and proposes such a, I think, brilliant idea to support that and also to try to bring it forward. But I realized that that might be not the case for everyone, because I was speaking with a colleague of mine and she asked me, why is that necessary? So, and I thought, well, yes, just because questions like that. No, but no, seriously, but I think it's really this, and that is what I said before, that to travel to the US, to engage with colleagues from AJC, to have these meetings, also home hospitality, etc., really kind of helped, I think, to try to, at least to try to adopt the perspective of Jews in the US and in Germany, and to get a certain understanding for the challenges that are still there, and maybe, as Remco just said, also are in parts on the rise. I mean, the anti-Semitism in certain groups of the German society, and I think especially now during the Corona crisis, you saw that with these conspiracy theories comes also often anti-Semitism. So I thought also the point in time was quite wisely chosen by Yad Vashem, and so yeah, basically that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got a question for both of you, and Remco, I'll look to you first, and that is the future importance of this program, of the exchange program. I know that when I went to Germany in 1990, the program informed me of Germany. I think that it was an important event in my life. The world is different today. So looking forward, what's the importance of our continuing this program going into the future, and what would your hopes be that it would accomplish? Remco, you first, and then Christina, I'll ask you the same question.
Well, I think I always compare the exchange program to our project interchange program when we bring people to Israel, because you can read a lot about the United States or Israel, but it's totally different when you're actually in the US, in Israel, talk to people, get to see things with your own eyes, and especially with the United States, it's just to understand the geography and how huge this country is super important, because also to understand that there isn't the United States, but there are a lot of different, diverse, wide range of diversity in the US society, and also because there are still a lot of misconceptions about the United States, and I guess it's no secret that over the last 4 years, the transatlantic relationship, and also by that the conception of American society, has seen better days in Germany. We can debate, for a very long time about the reasons, but it is what it is. And I think that, again, bringing people there and exposing them to the realities, also bringing people to Germany and exposing them to our society here is always important and can never be substituted, not by Zoom and not by anything else. So this is important. And I think that the program will remain important because when we look at the global situation, there's also not a secret that the West has come under pressure internally from populism and extremism, but we also see malign actors pressuring the West. So I think it is important that we in the West stick together and understand each other, work together, and of course these programs can help, first of all, to build personal relationships, but also then maybe in a second step also help build political bridges that maybe in times when things are not going so well, that we're still able to communicate and to have channels of communication. So and I think this is why this program is and will remain indispensable in the future.
Thank you, Remco. Christina, thoughts?
Well, I fully agree with Remco, of course, but maybe just to add, I think also the more time goes by, the more important it becomes, probably, to have exchanged on the topic of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust and Jewish life, vibrant Jewish life in the US, and also, as Remco said, to have and also, groups from the US coming to Germany and to see how Germany is trying to deal with this history and try to keep it, the memory alive. As I said in the beginning, it really manages to make a very abstract topic very real. And my experience is also that, at least for the group I went with to the US, that most of them still, they remain, if not engaged, then at least very much interested in these topics. And they have I would say higher sensibility for these topics, because they were just, dealing with it for a whole week and had these conversations on it, and saw also, the fantastic work of the AJC, also I have to say, to also see that the values that guide AJC are very much the same that, for example, guide the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, was also something that was important for me to realize. And I always found impressive that AJC is not only, engaging against anti-Semitism, but also engages against discrimination at every level. Your engagement for the Yazidi community, for example, I think is impressive. And this approach to think of these issues of discrimination as something that is a global topic that involves mainly everyone is, I think, something that was for me at least very convincing and impressive.
I could not agree with you more. I'm full of questions, but unfortunately our time has come to an end. And I want to thank both of you, Dr. Christina Eichhorst and Dr. Remco Lemus, for being with us today. I look forward to physically being with both of you. Who knows, maybe later this year, but thank you so very much. And now I'd like to turn the program back over to my friend and co-chair, Tony Meyer.
Thank you, Alan, Remco, Christina, and all of our speakers today for sharing their knowledge and insight on this important part of AJC history. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the 4 decades of American and German exchange program alumni who joined us for today's program. You are the living embodiment of the impact of this valued partnership. And finally, thank you again to the AJC leaders and our global audience for tuning in for today's special program. We hope to see you at another Advocacy Anywhere program very soon. Good day, guten Tag, and thank you for being with us.